Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, going to be giving you guys a full guide to hopefully get from bronze to masters in ranked right now. So in terms of ranked, there's two new modifiers to talk about. There's a ton of meta shifts and everything else. So I play ranked pretty much all day, every day. Of course, I was a former pro, and I love just breaking down pro play, looking at their drafts and everything else. So I feel like this is the best way to learn, especially on YouTube. So make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. So without further ado, let's jump into the modifiers then. So there's two new ones to break down. You can see here with a graphic on your screen. Of course, I don't absolutely know straight away who the best brawlers are for the modifiers, but this is just a good inkling for the first day. But again, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, because on Thursday, when ranked is actually released, I'll be doing the best brawlers for every single modifier definitively, because I'll be playing a bunch of ranked. Anyways, so jumping into healing wings. So healing wings increases your healing apart from passive regeneration by 30%. So heal gear isn't going to work more effectively. Your passive healing, you know, on brawlers, I don't know, for example, like Griff with his business resilient star power, that's not going to allow him to heal even more, I believe. It's just going to be like Poco heals, Byron heals. So you can see from the graphic, as I said, some of these brawlers are really going to get a lot better. So I'm just kind of anticipating things. I think Barley with his star power and gadget is going to be absolutely insane. Byron, he's going to be insane for a few reasons, because there's only two brawlers, I believe, that have anti-heal, right? There's Byron and there's Crow, because Byron's melee star power is going to be so deadly in this game mode. Just nerfing all of the healers that are going to go on. I just think it's going to be healers galore. You've got Poco, of course, his whole kit is based around healing. You've got Berry, literally his main attack heals, which is going to be crazy. Pam with the healing station, star power, mythic gear, so much healing. Again, Edgar with his main attack. I don't think he'll be as broken as I think, but I think he should be able to counter the other healers. And of course, he has healer built into his main attack. Meg, because she's got a healing gadget, and I just think because of the pure DPS that she puts out, I think she'll still be S tier. And then of course, Kit with the healing, when you jump onto someone, it's just going to be absolutely insane. There's a few other brawlers as well, which I think will be really good. You've got Colette with the gotcha gadget, and just of course countering all those tanks and healers. You've got Rico that can do really well at destroying enemy comps, and he's got his bouncy castle. There's just a lot of brawlers that have healing in their kit. I'm excited to try this one. It'll be a complete mess, but it'll be fun. The other new modifier is called Gotta Go Fast. So all game mode objectives achieved twice as fast. So you think of Brawl Ball, you only one goal to win. You think of Hot Zone, it's doubled in terms of how quickly you build up the percentage. You think of Heist, I'm pretty sure it's like 50% Heist save. So yeah, the games are going to be really quick, which I'm actually excited for, so I can just get through games much quicker and get towards masters. This could be pretty toxic though. So again, I don't know completely who the best brawlers are going to be, but I've got a good intuition. It's going to be the brawlers that are just really explosive and are really gadget dependent. That's what I think. So I feel like there's going to be some brawlers, you know, like Shelly, for example, where you can just spam 4 of those gadgets and just go galore with hypercharge and just get the game over quickly. I think they're going to be the difference maker. I don't think brawlers like Surge or maybe even Clancy that take a long time for them to get into the game, you know, they're not going to be as good. You know, Crow, for example, he takes a long time to get his hypercharge. I don't think he's going to be good. He's going to get ran all over. Of course, I think the number one tip again is just to spam the +1 gadget gear on loads of different brawlers and just spam gadgets. I think that's going to enable you just to get an upper hand in those battles. And then of course, any brawlers with hypercharge are going to be pretty good as well. And again, I just think there's going to be a lot of aggression. You think of Hot Zone, I think of a few different scenarios where like Poco just spamming the heal gadget with some tanks. I think it's just going to be too much for the opponents to really deal with, and they'll just complete the zone before you've even built up your supers and everything else. So this one's going to be a scary one. Look out for it. Moving on to the final modifier. Everyone should be familiar with this one, but it's actually my favorite modifier. It's Quickfire. So nothing has really changed with the Quickfire. I'll show up a graphic on the screen. I don't think there's been any changes really whatsoever, but I think the two best brawlers absolutely in Quickfire are Jean and Leon. So of course, making sure you've got them or banning them if the opponents have got it. Leon just melts through everything on Quickfire. Is insane even on Heist. Jean, of course, with his main attack projectile. Those are the two to worry about. There's other brawlers that are really annoying, like Spike, for example. Meg with the recent rework is going to be broken. Lola's a super underrated one, especially with the heal star power. I think Chester could be a sneakily good one as well. I used him a lot previously, but now he's actually meta. I think he'll be pretty good. And then there's just other brawlers that are like better on other gamers. You know, Quickfire on Heist, for example, you might want to use a Griff. So a lot of options to choose for, but there's a couple of really broken ones. Okay, so we're going to be starting off the rank guide with Canal, Grande, and Bounty. So as you can see on the screen, these are going to be all your best options with example drafts this time around. Use some monthly finals a couple of weeks ago, but I still feel like most of it is pretty much accurate. So in terms of the best first picks on Canal Grande, we've got to talk about, of course, Angelo still being one of the best brawlers in the game, and of course on Canal Grande, really insane. I think Eve is an okay pick, but I think she has fallen off a lot in the meta, but I think she's still at least a decent option. In terms of what I've been noticing dominating on this map, it's definitely the throwers. So likes of Barry, Barley, Larry, and Laurie, those are the three in particular which are so insane because they're just good at everything. Think of Barry, he can just heal an insane amount, and then he's got a super to be aggressive, defensive, he's got knockback. You think of Larry and Laurie, they're good against tanks and just good against snipers as well. Barley, he's just good at spamming heal gadgets and just spamming heals everywhere, and he's got a hypercharge. So yeah, throwers are very dominant in Canal Grande right now. I don't think there's really too many tanks in the Canal Grande meta. There's a couple that sneak in like Buster, Frank, and a few other options, but it's mainly just throwers and just maybe other brawlers that are good into throws, so maybe sometimes a bit of an aggression to try and counter them. But overall, Canal Grande, it is just a complete mess as always, to be honest. It's all about winning the first few interactions, making sure that you at least got one lane, of course, on lockdown, and of course making sure that you've at least got one throw in your composition, because if you don't, you're screwed. Moving on to the next map for Bounty, we have Hideout. Here's the best picks on your screen right here. So with Hideout, I will say that I think in rank most of the time people just go pure snipers, but I think snipers aren't always the best because you get pushed back a lot with snipers if you miss a lot of your shots. So you can see by the best first picks, as always, Kit is insane, Meg really strong in the meta, and then of course Jean's just always a safe pair of hands. And then in terms of other brawlers that might shock you a little bit, Larry and Laurie starting to creep back into the meta. Think of Tick's starting to creep into the meta. I think the kind of key with Bounty and Knockout in particular right now in this meta, because throws are so strong, is to always have one thrower on your team. Of course, there's like a ranking on how strong throwers are right now. You think of like Sprout and Grom are probably the two worst ones right now, and the best ones again are always going to be like Larry, Tick. You've got the likes of Barley still going to be good, Barry going to be pretty good. In terms of late pick here, you've still got snipers that can creep into the late pick drafts, like Mandy. You've got Nanny that can still be good as a late pick option. You've got Miko can be good pretty late in the game. There are a few options, you know, Leon can be a sneaky good option as well. In terms of underrated picks as well that I just always used, which are a bit of a cheat code on this map, Pearl, for example, is just tailor-made for Hideout. I don't know what it is with the lanes or whatever else. She's a really good counter to Kit, aggression, and just overall you're easily able to build up your heat, and super underrated. RT paired really well with a lot of different brawlers, so a lot of options on Hideout. It's all about trying to push your opponents back into their spawn. And lastly for Bounty, we have Shooting Star. So as always with Shooting Star, pretty much nothing has changed except for the fact that Mandy is now probably the best pick on Shooting Star. Since the buff to her super only needing 4 hits, her super counters pretty much all of the other meta brawlers in Shooting Star, so of course she's going to get even better now. You've got Angelo, still pretty consistent. Piper with a hypercharge, still pretty evident. Nanny's only really good as a late pick now. I just think there's just better brawlers in the meta that can overwhelm Nanny since the damage nerf. She has dropped off a lot. And you've got the likes of like Pearl, still really underrated. There's a lot of 8-bit strategies going on in Shooting Star that of course your randoms probably wouldn't be aware about. If you pair 8-bit with any thrower, and particularly a sniper, it's literally a tailor-made composition which you should be able to win pretty much every game, because you need one brawler to get the mid star, you've got a thrower just chipping down in mid, and then once 8-bit gets the turret, just put it far back, you've got the blue star, opponents have to push into you and there's nothing they can do. So that's literally a cheat strategy on Shooting Star. Literally nothing pretty much beats it. In terms of other picks that are sneaking into the meta, there aren't really a lot, to be honest. There's a likes of Melody that can be underrated and kind of forgotten about, but that's about it really. So now we're going to be moving on to Knockout, starting off with Beetles Rock. Here are your best picks on the screen right here, and you'd be very shocked to hear that throwers are completely dominating the meta again. Of course, you've got your outliers in terms of like Frank, Meg, and other brawlers like that, but for the most part it is just throwers dominating. So again, the key rule here is to make sure you've got one thrower in your composition, you've got one brawler that is good at at countering thrower counters. So for example, you've got Pearl, Artie, you need a brawler that has like a knockback or just something, a bit of damage, because those brawlers that counter throwers are the likes of the good late picks. So you've got like Lily, Frank, Miko, etc, etc. And then to round it off, there's normally just a sniper. Literally the example draft is probably the perfect way to draft around it. You've got that good tank counter, you got a sniper, and you got a throw. There's just nothing else you can really go wrong with in Bell's Rock, making sure you got all angles covered. In terms of good sneaky options as well, we've got Barley, really good in the late game and knockout. You've got the gadget to keep you alive, you've got a star power to keep you alive, and of course the super is really good at the end. You've got Piper, still really good at carrying. You've got Gray, that can be a good sneaky option, good at countering some of the snipers with the fake injury star power and the gadget to confirm kills and break open the map. And that's really about it for Bell's Rock. It's just the same kind of thrower nonsense. So next up we have Flare and Phoenix. Here are your best picks on the screen right here. So if you watch any competitive gameplay, this is probably the worst knockout map by far on the rotation, because normally what happens is that both teams just sit and spawn. It's probably not going to be like that in ranked. It's going to be a lot of people just running at you, but making sure again you've got brawlers that are just good at clumping up. Again, the key rule is to have a brawler that's either good into throwers or just get a thrower yourself. It's just pretty simple. You want to be making sure you're trying to get the best thrower, Larry and Laurie, because they're just good into everything. And then there's the likes of Tick, the likes of Barley, Berry. There's a lot of throwers to choose from, but make sure you try and get the best of the best. In terms of other good options as well, Buster's really good because you can just sit back with your teammates, and then the later the game goes on, the better Buster is, because he's got a lot of HP, he's got a super to deflect, he's got his gadget to confirm kills, so that's going to be really good. You know, RT is good for that reason because he's good at countering like Kit and other brawlers, for example, and then with his recording star power, he just stays alive for so long at the end, and that's what you need on Flare and Phoenix. Pearl, good for that reason, a lot of HP. You got like some Mandy, who can be pretty sneakily good because of the super. People don't know when you're about to use a super, but because there's so much grass, so that's why Mandy has definitely came back into the meta. In terms of late picks, I don't think there's too much to really worry about. There's not really a ton of great late pick meta options except for like throwers again, so yeah, there's a lot to consider in Flare and Phoenix. And lastly for knockout, we have Out in the Open. So here, your best picks on the screen right here. So in terms of Out in the Open, I will say the meta's definitely shifted away from like Brock and Eve. They used to always be some of the best brawlers on this map, and I just don't see them whatsoever. I think it's still like okay on ranked, especially if you want to break open that back wall so you don't get spawn trapped with Brock, but you know, typically there's normally like a wall break in your composition anyways. So in terms of best picks, always Jean and knockout, can never go wrong. Meg is just able to delete everything and knockout pretty much. She just get countered by snipers now, so it's kind of a reverse role for Meg. Before I used to always say pick Meg to counter snipers, now it's pretty much the opposite. You want to pick Meg as that tank counter, or just if you want to you can still pressure the opponent's back because you have 8,000 HP, but you get what I mean. Snipers are probably the best against her. You've got like the Byron that just pairs well with pretty much everything. You've still got Buster. Buster's a little bit harder to play on this map, a little bit more open, but a good Buster player will absolutely dominate. But likes of Colette can still be really good on this map because you'll always pretty much face any sort of aggression when it comes down to the meta right now. You've got Frank as a good late pick, believe it or not. Lily as a good late pick if there's several snipers. There's a lot to consider Out in the Open, but there's a lot of snipers and there's a lot of sniper counters. Okay, so now moving into Heist, starting off with Kaboom Canyon. Here, your best picks on the screen right here. So with Kaboom Canyon, pretty much nothing changes in the Heist meta. It's just full of hypercharge brawlers that can just delete the save pretty quickly. So here, your best picks. So in terms of the best options, of course, always Colette's going to be insane, especially with the hypercharge dealing 25%. You've got the likes of Chuck that are just pretty easy to play. The likes of Meg are just dominating the meta right now. Cole as well, always going to be pretty good. Melody, really good. Gale is especially good on Kaboom Canyon. He was good before the super buff recently because you get the launch pad, you jump into mid, and you just get so much pressure from that alone. So with Kaboom Canyon, it's always about just pinching collectively, making sure that there's not a bunch of brawlers in the middle, and then you can just start to just rain damage like that. In terms of good options as well, Amber's always pretty good against everything. That's a brawler that I love using when it comes down to Heist right now. She can be good in the draft because you can switch between her builds, whether you go with the gadget that can just run faster and burn down snipers, or if there's any assassins, you can just switch the gadget and counter them pretty easily. In terms of other options as well, pretty underrated. 8-bit is definitely an underrated option because not a lot of people really think about 8-bit, but he still does an insane amount of damage with his boosted booster star power. But yeah, Heist is the same. It's just hypercharged brawlers. Alright guys, jumping into the next Heist map, which is Hot Potato. Here, your best picks on a screen right here. So with Hot Potato, again, it's the same hypercharged nonsense going on. So some of the best picks are going to be absolutely Colette, because it's a very tank-heavy meta right now in some senses with Frank and whatever else with Meg. So Colette's just good at countering everything, especially in the mid. Probably the best mid brawler on this map. You got the likes of Crow, which is really underrated in the Heist meta right now. Didn't actually speak about it too much in Kaboom Canyon because sometimes he's outranged by snipers. But Hot Potato in the mid, he's really good. And then as the game goes on, hypercharged to end the game really easily. Nita, really good option, especially because there's always going to be a tank in the draft, and she's just really good once she gets her super. Rico's really good offensively, defensively, and again, throwers are still dominating, even though it's probably a little bit riskier to use throwers in the Heist meta because there's just so much aggression. Still, Barley's going to be insane with the hypercharge. Still, Larry can be pretty good. Dynamite is a late pick, can be pretty good as well. Again, there's still some brawlers which people forget about. Like, I just played so much Melody last meta. People always forgot about it for some reason. They just banned other hypercharged brawlers. You got the likes of good late picks as well with Buzz, Primo, Edgar, all of these good options in Hot Potato. But it's a very base race map, so be prepared. So now moving on to the final Heist map, we have Safe Zone here. Your best picks on the screen right here. So in terms of the best first picks, again, it's always going to be the same type of brawlers. So it's going to be Chuck, Melody, Colette, the likes of Angelo, really good on Safe Zone, and Kaboom Canyon as well. The same with Meg, just dominating the meta literally everywhere. One thing I didn't mention as well is that Clancy, I don't know how he'll fare off in the Heist ranked meta. I think he'll be pretty good, but I just don't want to put him anywhere just in case he's not actually broken. But I will update you guys in a few days if he is broken everywhere. Don't you worry about that. Also, you can always go the likes of Colt. Colt is just good everywhere inside of Heist because you just don't need to aim. You just aim for the Heist safe and just spam the gadgets, and you should be able to, should be good to go. In terms of good options as well, that might be surprising. Gale, I didn't mention in Hot Potato, but definitely good in Safe Zone. You can use the launch pad to jump over, and if you're scared of facing against any aggro, Gale's good for that, and he's a good counter to Meg. You've got like Byron, Piper, really good in the middle, but with Safe Zone, it's always good to have that kind of sharpshooter in the middle, whether it's Bell, whether it's Piper, anyone with range, 8-bit even. You've got good late picks as well with Crow, with the hypercharge and everything else. It's just Heist meta. It's just full of hypercharged brawlers. Making sure you got at least one hypercharged brawler though to make an impact. Okay, so now moving into the best picks for Hot Zone, Dueling Beetles, starting off with this. And so in terms of Dueling Beetles, it is again a very thrower-centric map in my opinion. That's why you see a lot of pros ban Barley even with first pick. Normally he's a brawler you can counter, but because you can spawn trap easily on this map with throwers, it's just, I would say most of the time ban like Barry and Barley. Those are the brawlers that bring the toxic synergies going. So in terms of the draft, you can probably get away with going like a Frank early on in the draft in Dueling Beetles because it is Hot Zone, so a tank can stay on the zone for a prolonged amount of time. With it doesn't even need support, it's just a tank. So whether you go Frank, whether you go Buster, those are really good options. In terms of how you want to go about things with Dueling Beetles, you've always got to consider rock, paper, scissors here. So of course you've got to consider getting countered late on by throwers, so making sure you've got any type of beefy brawler or at least a counter to that can go aggressive. You've got the likes of having a tank counter in there as always, so whether that's Jessie, whether that's Colette, whether that's Lou, whether that's Gale, there's a lot of options there. And then, of course, you can always late game go a thrower to counter any squishy brawlers. But I think with this meta, there's not really too many squishy brawlers in Dueling Beetles right now because people are scared of getting run down. So there's just a lot to consider. So now jumping into open business. And as you can see, again, it is very thrower heavy. It's just a Hot Zone meta right now. So in terms of kind of cheap brawlers that I find I win every single game with is Barley and Barry again. I just love these two brawlers. Barley is just so good for sustain because you've got the gadget and of course your heal. Barry's literally got that built into him with his super as well, and they're not really countered too much by aggression on this map. There's a lot of walls and wall breaks aren't really too good in the meta right now. In terms of other good options as well, I always like to go the likes of Byron on this map because again you want that kind of healer to help sustain on the Hot Zone. In terms of other good options, it should be a no-brainer that the likes of Meg, Frank, and Gale are always at the top of the meta, especially when it comes down to Hot Zone. Gale is so underrated still by the casuals, I think. I just dominate with him every single time. Jessie can be pretty good because people are forgetting, even though she's countered by throwers, she's still a good option to have, especially countering those tanks. In terms of what I face off against a lot is likes of Sandy for whatever reason, but I think Sandy is countered a lot in this meta, especially if you've got throwers and everything else. So with Hot Zone, there's a lot to take into consideration because throwers are just so strong. So you know, making sure you've at least got one counter to thrower or go throw yourself. So jumping into the final Hot Zone map, we have parallel plays here. Your best picks on the screen right here. So in terms of best first picks, again, it's the likes of throwers and it's going to be the likes of Kit. They're just dominating everywhere right now. And parallel plays, it's pretty hard to play with randoms. So most of the time, you want to be making sure that you probably have got all things covered. So that's why I kind of go for tank counters rather than anything else, because, you know, it's just going to be up to your randoms going stupid things like Colt, Dynamite, and they're going to get countered. So that's why I go like Gale, Surge, Nita, Lou, etc. They're really good at carrying and good defensive. Colette as well, good for that reason. Gale is just exceptional on parallel plays, always has been. Jesse's always been pretty good. Good, again, brawlers that are probably good here and not really in many other places too much, like Surge and Nita. I just love going those brawlers on this map because you can always pop off and make good plays. Surge is good because of course you got your super to jump over walls and that can be pretty annoying. In terms of other options as well, we've got the likes of RT, can be really good defensive lane. You've got like Chuck, offensive lane, that can be pretty underrated. Miko as well, any sort of tanks. So again, making sure in parallel plays on the left side you've got like a tank counter. In the middle, you've got either a thrower or like a Byron or something that can help chip and pinch. And then on the right lane, you've got something offensively to try and get that right side zone. So now moving on to Brawl, start off with center stage here. Your best picks on the screen right here. So of course, with center stage, it's going to be a lot of tanks and it's going to be a lot of tank counters. So much grass and so many things to consider within the draft. So in terms of the best first picks, absolutely the best two are going to be Gale and Meg pretty much everywhere right now. And of course, on this map, they just shred through tanks and shred through everything in this meta. But like I said, Berry can be really good even though he's a thrower. There's just so much cheese, and if you clump up a lot, you're going to get a lot of value with Berry. In terms of really good picks that pros are even abusing a lot is Chester, because you can use the vision gear on Chester and just destroy tanks. I mean, most time I don't even need vision gear on Chester, actually just use speed gear, damage gear, and just destroy everyone. You've also got his super that can break open a wall, make it easier to get some goals. In terms of other good options, Buster, he's just absolutely cracked right now in the meta, and because on this map in center stage, most of the time you're kind of just sitting there and trying to chip and waiting for the opponents to sneak up on you. Well, Buster, if anyone sneaks up on you, they're pretty much dead because you just pull them towards you with a gadget, and you've also got a super as well, which works really well inside of bushes. Surge, again, another good carry option in center stage, literally has been all year. The likes of Rosa, really good late on in the draft. Sandy's still pretty good. Nita, Frank is still pretty good even early on in the draft. So there's just a lot going on. You're making sure that you've got a tank counter and probably a tank. Now moving into Pinball Dreams here, your best picks on the screen right here. So you'll be surprised, Gale and Meg are the best picks, and then the likes of Berry and Barley are just dominating on this map pool right now. So make sure that you've got one of those at least. Either or is pretty good. In terms of other good throwers as well, Larry and Laurie. So again, making sure that you've got either wall break or you've got a thrower, because they just absolutely dominate in this meta. In terms of good mid options, you've got the likes of Max. Byron can be pretty good. I'm seeing a lot of Chester right now used as a mid on Pinball Dreams, believe it or not, just because of the way his attack works. It's just pretty easy to scout and just get control of the map really easily with Chester. You've also got the likes of Rico, can be a really solid carry pick, but the thing about Rico, he does get countered by the throwers on this map, so be careful of that. Again, you've still got the likes of Buster being pretty good in the meta. The likes of Nita can be pretty good and underrated in Pinball Dreams. The likes of Surge, the likes of Frank late on in the draft. Stu can be pretty good as that mid brawler. I've seen a lot right now in the pro meta, because even though he gets countered by throwers, at least he's got the wall break to open up the map a lot. So it is kind of crazy with this draft meta right now. So now jumping into the final Brawl map, we have Penalty Kick, and would you be surprised to say that the best brawlers still are going to be Gale and Meg? But still, at the same time, there are some really toxic options as well. So I would actually ban throwers if I were you guys. There's a lot of throwers to ban, but just ban as many as you can, unless you've got first pick. So the likes of Barley, Larry and Laurie, Berry, Dynamite probably better later on in the draft. Rico is just absolutely insane on Penalty Kick. Again, you've got to make sure you've got a thrower in your composition. Even if it comes down to like Sprout, even later on in the draft, throwers just absolutely dominate. I see actually a lot in the draft that people go double throws because of how strong throwers are on penalty kick. And of course, it doesn't matter how many wall breakers you have. It's so hard to break open maps on penalty kick, and it's just actually just so hard to break out of spawns. So either making sure you've got like a jump mechanic maybe, or some type of like aggression with a tank that can break through walls. Yeah, I don't know. Penalty kick is a hard one to explain because there's just so much going on and so many things to consider. And finally, moving on to gem grab, starting off with Hard Rock Mine. So here, your best picks on the screen right here. So pretty much all the time, Meg and Gale are going to be your best options everywhere, with the likes of Berry being pretty toxic. Rico going to be really good now since the Hypercharge. He kind of went out of the pro meta in Hard Rock Mine and other situations, but the Hypercharge is just so good, so elevating him again. In terms of options, it kind of depends on how you feel, because you can either go Frank yourself or always consider Frank in the draft. Frank in gem grab and Brawl Ball in particular, you've always got to consider. So again, making sure you've got the likes of either Colette, Nita, Gale, just any of those tank counters in there, or you got to just get Frank yourself, because a lot really goes on. In terms of how I'm seeing the draft really go on, there's a few good mids in gem grab on this map in particular. You've got the likes of 8-Bit, Gene, the likes of Piper starting to return a little bit, but again, making sure that your mid brawler has some type of mechanic that can either get away from tanks or defend yourself a little bit. So that's why I like Gene a lot, even though he doesn't do a lot of damage. He's still got the knockback, and he's got the pull to turn around games. In terms of the lanes as well, you've got the likes of Kit that can be pretty annoying to deal with. You've got the likes of Ruffs that can be pretty good, Stu. So yeah, same old Hard Rock Mine. So now moving on to double swoosh here, your best picks on the screen right here. So in terms of the picks, I always look at and ban it if the opponents have first pick. It's definitely Gene. Even though he's not like the most toxic brawler, just his vision gear is just so good on this map, and of course the Gene pool is just so dangerous on a map like this, so I tend to ban it a lot of the time. But also you got to ban the likes of Sandy, Meg, Gale. There's just so many brawlers that you got to think about. Again, Frank late on the draft, so making sure that in your draft you got something that can counter him. So that's why a lot of people think Frank is overrated, because he's not seen too much in draft, but you can see by how the pros draft, they always consider a Frank. So again, making sure they've got either like a Chester, who's really good. Even Shelly can be really solid on this map. Amber's really good as a lane option and still okay into tanks. You've got the likes of Crow that are starting to come back into like the gem grab meta and everything else, because he's just really good at scouting, chipping, and making sure that he can pinch people out. Buster's really good on this map, always has been. The likes of Surge, again, coming back into the meta, especially on a grassy map, because it's just so easy to get your level with his speed gear, and then you can just absolutely hard counter and carry it at the same time. So double swoosh. In terms of mids as well, you are seeing a lot of counter options to Gene, like Mr. P, Jesse, the likes of Stu can be good in the mid as well. So yeah, double swoosh, always considering that there might be someone around the corner, so making sure you got vision gear on a lot of those brawlers. So now finally moving into Undermine. So Undermine was one of the hardest ones, because I actually haven't got this too much in ranked myself, but here are your best picks on the screen right here. So as always, the best picks are going to be the likes of Meg, Gale down the lane. Gale is insane on this map with the vision gear. It's just impossible to push into him. Same with Chester as well. So good at countering tanks and just so good in the grass. You've got the likes of Frank, who are really strong first pick on Undermine, because his main attack is just so easy to scout the grass with, and he can just sit behind walls so easily. So brawlers like that are actually really annoying to deal with. That's why I like Buzz late on in the draft actually can be pretty underrated as well. Sandy can be really annoying to deal with because he's really good at wall peeking on this map, and it's just that wall down the lanes where you just got to use and abuse them as much as possible. That's why Rico actually isn't as good as a pick as you would think, because it's quite easy to avoid the Rico shots on this map and pinch pretty easily. Gene, of course, being a really good mid on this map. The likes of Stu can be pretty underrated in the mid. Piper, Byron, Meg, of course, dominating all the time. Buster's really good on this map because, again, you've got good wall peeking capabilities with Buster, but you've got good sustain in the grass and just pinching and just being really annoying. That's what you've got to do in Undermine. Also got to consider an Undermine as well. Once you lose your lane, it's incredibly harder than any other map to regain your position. So more than anything, focus on trying to win your 1v1 and then spawn trap in, because if you lose your lane, it's pretty much GG unless a miracle happens and your mid can help you win that battle. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Again, this is a lot of pro data, me playing a lot of rank myself pretty much all the time, and I hope this really helps you guys out. And if you share my rank guide anywhere, make sure to share this video at least. I really appreciate it. So that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.